this evening, I'm going to tell you a quick story about Explosion Club the other day. So I'm guessing most of you were in Explosion Club when you were younger. This is part of my story, so that's okay, that's all right. If I go off on one, then you can do waffle. So if you weren't in Explosion Club, it's like youth, but for like younger ones. So it's a bit more structured, a bit different. So we had the last Explosion Club the other Tuesday, and Abby was asking questions of all the kids, like all the things that we've done this term, and was like, oh, do you remember when we did this? Can you remember what that answer was? And she was trying to get them to answer questions, kind of about like what they'd been learning to see if they could remember. And I was sitting next to one little tiny boy who was about 6 years old, and he was doing that thing that some of you might have done when you were little, I don't know, but I've definitely seen children doing it before, where every time a question was answered, he was like, Jesus! Jesus! Like every single time. And I was a bit like, no, it's not Jesus. This answer is like, they were in jail, or like, they prayed, or whatever the answer to the question was. But it was just constantly like, oh, it's Jesus! And I was like, oh gosh, there better be an answer that's Jesus. Anyway, so every time they got an answer right, Abby was throwing them a sweet. So this kid was desperate to get an answer right, because he was desperate for a sweet. So, and we'd even said, you've got to put your hand up to answer. And you know, little kids, they don't really quite get that. They don't really get that you've got to put your hand up and then wait for someone to pick you, and then you can answer. So he just put his hand up and was going, Jesus, 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 like this. And I was like, okay, calm down. Anyway, eventually, there was a question that Abby'd asked, and the answer was Jesus. So I was like, now, to this little tot, and was kind of prodding him. And I was going to Abby, over here, ask here. And so Abby was like, go on then, give us the answer. And he was like, went completely blank, total blank, like, huh? And I was like, go on, say your answer. You've been saying it all night, say your answer. And he was like, an angel? And I was just a bit like, no, come on, you've been going Jesus all night. And eventually I was like, no, the other answer. What have you been saying all night? Come on, who are we here for? And he was like, Jesus! Brilliant. And then he got his sweet, so that was great. But I just love that sometimes with little children, and some of you might have been those little children, I don't know, when you were little in like Sunday clubs or Sunday schools, who always answered that. And I used to teach in a school, that was a Church of England school, so we talked a lot about Jesus. In an assembly, kids would always be like, Jesus, Miss, or God, or the ones that thought they were a bit smart would be like, Miss, God and Jesus, got it covered, got them both. Because that was like always the answer. And it is actually. I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, yeah, do you know what? Jesus is always the answer. I love that thing about little kids, and this little boy got me thinking about it in the Explosion Club, that kind of like, the answer is always Jesus. And kind of as you grow older, you realise that sometimes, you know, when you're doing a maths problem, the answer might not be Jesus. But do you know what? I kind of feel, having chatted with this little tot the other day, and watched him answer Jesus, the answer is always Jesus. Not maybe always literally, like if you were going to say, like, what's the weather like tomorrow? You wouldn't be like, it's Jesus, in terms of the weather. But actually, like, ultimately, whatever the weather is, God created the weather, so it's to do with Jesus. And whatever the weather is like, it shouldn't really affect how I am towards Jesus, how I serve Jesus, how different I react to Jesus. And I kind of thought, actually, do you know what? Lots of questions that we might ask, ultimately, they come down to Jesus. So, for example, I know, some of you might spend the rest of this evening trying to ask me questions and be like, Jesus isn't the answer. So you could ask Tom later, like, well, what are we having for this barbecue next week? And Tom's probably not going to say Jesus. He's probably going to say, like, beef burgers or something like that. But then, like, you can think through, well, the beef burgers come from cows, and the cows are created by God, and they eat the grass that God made the sun to shine and the rain to fall to grow the grass, to feed the cows, and then we eat the cows and their beef burgers. So actually, still kind of because of Jesus. So I'm like, yeah, Jesus is the answer to a lot of things, actually. And kind of the questions that we have in our lives, I'm like, actually, yeah, Jesus is always going to be the answer. In whatever those questions are, if I look to Jesus, I will find my answer. So if everything's coming back to Jesus, I'm just going to give you a quick quiz here, okay? Quick quiz in the middle between the stories. So I was thinking about cows and how cows, eat the grass and stuff, and God created them, and sheep and stuff, and we get wool from sheep, and God created the sheep and all those kinds of things. So I thought, we'll just do a quick quiz here, okay? So if you saw a group of cows, what's a group of cows called? Bit waffling. Go on, Jonah. Group of cows. Anyone know? Go on, Emma. Herd of cows. Brilliant. Yay. Herd of cows. How about a group of sheep? A flock of sheep. Yeah, flock of sheep. Jesus. Yeah, I love you. Thank you, Jonah. So herd of cows, flock of sheep. Anyone know dogs? Bunch of dogs. What would you call a bunch of dogs? Pack of dogs. Brilliant. Very good. Okay, we'll make it a little bit harder. So we've got a herd of cows, flock of sheep, pack of dogs. How about a group of geese? Yeah, a gaggle. It's brilliant, isn't it? A gaggle of geese. So you can look extremely intelligent the next time you happen to see a group of geese and be like, there goes a gaggle of geese. How about a group of lions? Pride of lions. Yeah, Lion King. How about caterpillars? A group of caterpillars. Jesus, yeah. A group of caterpillars, apparently we would refer to as an army of caterpillars.
I don't think you would ever see like 5 caterpillars.
No. But you could do. There's often butterflies around, so... Well, there we go, yeah. Go on. A what of crows? A murder of crows. There are some great ones. So if you want to go home and like Google collective nouns for stuff, it's quite fun. You can have like a school of fish, things like that. A shiver of sharks, apparently. You're wasting my time. Don't waste my time. Tom's timing me. How about a group of Christians? Yeah, a church. Yeah, Jesus' people, Jesus' followers. So a group of Christians is church. So it's not the building and the bricks and stuff that we see around us. As nice as it is to have a place that we can meet, a group of Christians is church. So, what if you believe in Jesus and you know that Jesus is the answer, but you kind of are not really involved in church? What then? I'm going to tell you another story. There you go, Emma's got her answer. I'm going to tell you another story, and this is a story that was told to me when I was quite a young Christian. I was in my early 20s, and this story has really stuck with me, and it might stick with some of you. It might not, but it might do. So I'm going to tell you this story. Now, this story takes place in the winter time, so you can already just get yourself in that nice and cold, nice and cool, and just imagine that with the heat that we've got at the moment. It takes place in the winter time, and it's about a man who went to church, and he'd go to the church and join in with things on a Sunday morning and see his friends and stuff like that. But then one Sunday he couldn't go because he had some family members staying and they weren't Christians, so he kind of went and did other things with them. And then I think the following Sunday he wasn't going to be able to get there because he had some work to do ready for Monday morning. So he's like, well, I won't go today because I've got to get this work done for Monday. And then the Sunday after that, he was just feeling a little bit rough, a little bit ill. Maybe it was COVID. So he didn't go. And he kind of then, the Sunday after that, he was like, well, I haven't been for 3 weeks. And it's quite nice having a bit of a lie-in on a Sunday. I might not go. And he kind of got a bit out of the habit. So another friend of his, who also was part of the same church, phoned him up and was like, can I come round and visit you? And he was like, yeah, of course you can. And the guy was like, I know what's going to happen. He's going to come round and he's going to be like, come on, why aren't you going to church? Blah, 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 blah. I just have to deal with it. So the friend came round and the guy was sitting in his living room and he'd lit a fire because it was winter time. It was a bit chilly. So he'd lit a nice fire, a little bit like we'll have a barbecue next week. I love flames. Anybody here like watching flames? In a kind of positive, good, God's created flames. It's nice to watch a fire. Yeah? Yeah, but it's still nice to watch the flames though, isn't it? All good. Watching the flames. Fireman John would approve just watching a controlled fire, hopefully. We'll have to ask him. But if you are lucky enough to have a fireplace in your house, it's something I love doing. It's just sitting and watching the flames. So this guy was sitting in his living room and his friend came round and he gave him a cup of tea and they sat down and the guy was like, here it comes. He's going to start laying into me because I haven't been to church for a while. And the friend didn't. He just sat there and they just watched the flames and the fire kind of burning brightly. What colours do you see in the flames?
I wonder.
Well, I don't know. What colours do you see in the flames?
Blue.
Blue? Green sometimes. Blue, green.
Purple.
Purple maybe, yeah. And if it's really, really hot, right in the middle, kind of goes white hot as well. So yeah, see, you guys do like watching flames and fires. You know all the colours that come out. So their friend just sat and watched, and they just sat and watched the fire for a while. And then after a while, the friend got up and picked up the tongs. You know, fire tongs? A bit like you use for sausages in a barbecue. And he picked up the tongs, they're fireproof, and he did it very safely so that no firemen were needed. And he reached into the fire and he got one of the like white hot coals from the very centre of the fire, like burning bright, bright, bright colours. And he picked it up and he moved it over and he put it on the hearth and he just left it there. And it slowly went dull and dark and black and cold. And he just left it there. And they both looked at it. And the friend turned to the guy who hadn't been at church for a while and he went, "That's you." And then he picked the coal up again with the tongs and put it back in the centre of the fire. And very quickly, it burned bright again. Bright, bright, red hot with the fire. And the friend said, "All right then, I'll see you on Sunday." And off he went. I quite like that story because it's an illustration, isn't it? If we're all together and working together for Jesus, we're what we call on fire for Jesus, filled with the Spirit. But once we come out of the flames, out of that being together with others, we can't actually do it on our own. You can't burn one coal on its own. It will burn out and go cold. It's not going to last. So I'm going to leave you with a verse from Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, which says, and I love this, "Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another." That's what the guy in the story is doing. So, if Jesus is the answer, being church together keeps us on fire for Jesus. If we step away, we go cold, like that coal, and we can't serve.